Nice looking moss of linoleum you got here. Which vault are you going to put us in, Jeeves?
It's Grissom, sir.
That's what I said. It's gruesome.
In the library, if you please, gentlemen.
Just my luck. I haven't got my library card with me. Don't get physical.
A killer robot, a giant gorilla, a gorgeous vampire woman, and a man-eating plant? Oh man, the Bowery Boys could be in over their heads this time. The Bowery Boys Meet the Monsters from 1954 was a goofy, contrived, and predictable film, and I loved every minute of it. I'll give a quick summary of this silly film and then offer some closing thoughts and some things that I learned. So, a quick summary. A baseball flies through the window at Louie's sweet shop, bounces off Louie's head, and it turns out that this is a frequent occurrence because the local neighborhood kids, well, they just need space to play baseball. So the Bowery Boys, we have Leo Gorsey as Slip Mahoney and Hunts Hall as Satch Jones, they've got an idea that a local vacant lot would be perfect for the kids to use to play. So they go and track down the owners to ask about being able to get this lot to use. And it turns out it's owned by a family, the Gravesends, and they are invited to come and visit them on Long Island and to spend the night. And here is where things get crazy. So the Bowery Boys show up, and we meet the Gravesends and discover they are a wild bunch. One is a mad scientist who wants a brain for his gorilla, but his brother wants a brain for a giant robot. Their sister wants the boys as fresh meat for her man-eating tree, and their niece Francine is, well, a vampire, and wants their blood. And what follows is a wacky series of events as the two Bowery Boys spend most of their time on the run from all of these zany characters, including a crazy butler wielding a big old butcher's knife. Will the boys survive the craziness of this madcap mansion? Well, I can't even begin to do justice trying to summarize the film, so I'll just let you check out this one for yourself. But let me give my general thoughts on this film. This was a very fun, very silly movie. And the pacing is quick, and the jokes and the slapsticks, all of the gags, they're hilarious. I really had a lot of fun with this one, and at just over an hour, it's a breeze of a watch. From what I've read in some of the reviews and the comments, this is considered one of the best of the Bowery Boys films. Be aware, of course, that the plot is pretty thin, the effects look cheap, but it's the wacky humor and sight gags that you're here for. The two main stars here are Leo Gorsey as Slip Mahoney and Hunts Hall as Satch Jones. They've sort of got the Abbott and Costello vibe going on, with Slip as the straight man and Satch as the goofball, doing all of the, the visual humor and the ridiculous things. I realize there are parallels that have been made with this film and with Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein from 1948, which, again, it's basically two silly guys running for their lives from a bunch of monsters, and yeah, it's pretty much the same formula, and I'm fine with it, honestly. I do love Leo Gorsey's malapropisms. It's when you mistakenly use a word that sounds similar to the word that they intended, but you substitute the wrong word for comedic effect. Like, gentlemen, I'm very much infested with all of this science friction, that sort of thing.
You see, I'm what you might call a benefactor of humanity.
Now, the characters of the Gravesend family. Clearly, they're an amalgam of different monster movie tropes. The vampire, the mad scientist, the wolf man, and so on. But here's where I was a little fuzzy. I was thinking this being 1954. Okay, maybe they were inspired by the Addams Family characters. But then I had to kind of think about it and do a double check, because at this point in time, the Addams Family, they existed, yes, but only as the cartoon characters of Charles Addams, who started drawing the Addams Family characters for the New Yorker in 1938. But the live-action Addams Family didn't premiere until 1964. So that led me back to thinking, and yeah, this is the kind of thing I think about when I'm trying to fall asleep at night, that maybe these Gravesends were based more on the 1930s, 1940s Universal monster cycle, or even from, say, the Phantom Creeps Saturday matinee serials, with the remote-controlled robot and Bela Lugosi, instead of being based on Adams' characters, since he didn't really fully exist as live action yet, only in cartoon form. And yeah, I'm probably digging into this a little too deep, but let me know your thoughts in the comments and where you think the inspiration from some of these silly monsters came from. In any case, I thought the Gravesend family, they were great. Very colorful characters. You've got John Denner playing Dr. Derek Gravesend, who's kind of got the mad scientist, Dr. Frankenstein energy. You've got Lloyd Corrigan playing Anton Gravesend, his equally sinister assistant. And maybe a little hint of Igor there, I don't know. Ellen Corby was great as Amelia Gravesend, who is just sweet lady who just wants these Bowery Boys to basically be plant food for her giant creature. A little later she would play Grandma from the Walton series. Good night, John Boy. Laura Mason plays Francine Gravesend, who's sort of a proto-Lily Munster. And Paul Wexler plays Grissom, the butler. And, watching him here, I could have sworn it was a young actor, James Cromwell, but no. Different actor, different time frame. But there's a resemblance there, and clearly there's a Lurch the Butler vibe to him. And there's also a brief nod to the Wolfman, or maybe even Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I don't know, as the butler tries out an experimental potion. Anyhow, a quick note, Steve Calvert played the gorilla. And it's funny how it's the same silly-looking gorilla costume that seems to show up in so many of the films of this era. It looks completely phony, and yet I find it so funny. Calvert had also uncredited gorilla roles in other films that I've reviewed on the channel, like Bride of the Gorilla and Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla, and so on. I think this era of cinema was just fascinated with gorillas, I guess. Now, back to Leo Gorcey. I realized that his films are just a treasure trove I need to go exploring. I mean, there are about 40 Bowery Boy films that he was in through the 40s and the 50s that I'm just starting to dig into. He appeared with the East Side Kids in another film, the 1941 monogram monster comedy Spooks Run Wild, that also features Bela Lugosi himself. Oh man, that's just too awesome not to review. That might be my next review, actually. Oh, and Lugosi and the East Side Kids would later team up again in Ghosts on the Loose in 1943. Too many films that I need to watch. And I realized, too, in a more broad sense, I've really got some research that I need to do into the evolution of the Dead End Kids from the late 1930s, sort of the original group that Gorcey was a part of, to the East Side Kids of the 40s, to the Bowery Boys, and who all of these characters are and how they all connect. It seems that studios at the time were big into that, working class, urban youth audience, coming out of the Depression era, the wartime era. So that's why there seem to be so many of these films that feature a scrappy bunch of city kids with attitude and their adventures. And honestly, that's a big part of why I love doing this channel. I just love the learning and the research and the discovery, all of the history. There's always something fascinating to find out about the golden age of Hollywood, and I love the exploration, and I really look forward to it. So I hope you'll continue to join me on this crazy journey and help me out on the way. If there's anything you have to share or particular great films of this series, I'd love to hear it. In any case, that's my review of the Bowery Boys Meet the Monsters from 1954. A super silly film featuring crazy monsters, quick humor, and visual gags, courtesy of Leo Gorcey and Hunts Hall, and a colorful cast of wacky characters. I had a lot of fun with this, and I think you will too. And it's definitely a film worth checking out.